Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode where we are going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to show you how we're going to build this really cool epoxy table in first person camera view. It's something different, something we've never done before, something I've never seen before on YouTube. So hopefully you're going to be entertained in this week's episode, and you guys do want to stick until the end of this video because we got a really cool announcement we want to share with you. Starting off this week's project, we are going to build an 8-seater epoxy table for one of our clients, and the specific wood species we're going with is locally sourced from the country I'm from, South Africa, and it's called Jackalberry. And as you can see, I'm just busy marking my center line where I'm going to cut my slab in half. Getting my Festool track saw. This machine is an absolute beast when it comes to cutting thick slabs in half. Just to give you a good idea, the total thickness for this slab was 80 millimeter in total, and I cut this slab in half with one go. This is an absolute beast of a machine. Moving to the next step, and that is just by placing my two half slabs on my mold I'm going to use, just to get a good idea of how my end product is going to look, and obviously to send the client some pictures, so to get them excited for the table we're going to build for them. Now, obviously, when you're going to pour your epoxy, you want to make sure to remove all the bark and softwood from your table. You do not want your epoxy to stick to a material that is not fastened to your slab. And unfortunately, the bark you need to remove fully. And we're going to start off by removing the bigger pieces of bark on your slab. And we're just using a normal hammer and chisel to do this step in our project. This is super critical. You do not want your epoxy to stick to the bark on your project. Moving to the chainsaw with my steel wire brush. This is to remove all the dirt and to make sure you got nice deep grooves on the live edge on your slab. That's just to make sure that your epoxy has got a better bond to your wooden slab. Moving to the smaller steel wire brushes, this is just to make sure that you get into all the small little spaces the bigger grinder with the bigger brush do not get in. So this is just to make sure you get all the small little parts, to make sure you get all the dirt and bark out of all the small little grooves and pockets on your wooden slab. Now, we obviously got our mold, and we obviously placed our slabs on top of our mold, and now we're just cutting the last pieces off to make sure once we're going to place our wooden slab into our mold that is going to be the perfect size. Now just building a mold for our epoxy pour, and we're going to use a normal white melamine sheet. The white melamine on top of the chipboard basically prevents the epoxy from penetrating into the wood. That's why we like to use white melamine sheet. And once we are done putting our side panels up, we're going to add silicone on the inside of our mold to make sure the epoxy is not going to leak out once we're going to start the pouring process. So this product we are using here is called ram wax. It's basically to make sure the epoxy is not going to stick to the white melamine. This is super critical because when you're going to remove your table from your mold, we had an instance before where the epoxy stuck to the slab, and that's an absolute disaster. So we use this wax to make sure the epoxy is not going to stick to your wooden mold. And you obviously have to make sure that your mold is sitting 100% level. That's to make sure that there's not going to be more epoxy on the one side than the other side. And now just placing our wooden slab into our mold, and as you can see, it's going to sit like a glove. It's going to sit perfect. And another tip I want to give you is when you're building a table, always to make sure to build your tables slightly bigger lengthwise and widthwise. This is just going to help you to prevent, if you're going to make any mistakes, that you have room for error. So wood obviously floats. So when you're going to pour your epoxy, the wood is going to move. Now, to make sure the wood is going to stick in its place, we're going to use our pony clamps and clamp our pieces of wood down to prevent our wood from moving. So we obviously calculated the amount of epoxy we're going to use for this project, and we're going to do a total of 3 pours on our table. This is the first pour we're going to do, and just adding some black pigment to our mix and using a stir mix thing on a super low setting to make sure we have as less as possible bubbles, and just mixing at a very slow speed. And we obviously came back afterwards with a wooden paddle just to make sure we scrape all the sides and the bottom and the corners to make sure our resin and our hardener is mixed very thoroughly together. Just using my air hose to make sure we remove the last bits of dust particles in our epoxy mold to make sure there's no dust when we're going to start pouring our epoxy. Another tip I want to give you is something we've noticed over the period of building tables. We started using a small little ridge on each table, as you can see here, to pour on the ridge of the side of your table. That's going to prevent more bubbles of coming out. So another thing I want to share with you is to pour as slowly as possible. we normally used to pour fast, and we ended up having more bubbles than usual. So the steps is going to help you, and just using my gas torch to remove all the air bubbles the epoxy made. Another tip I want to share with you is when you're going to pour your epoxy. Like I mentioned before, for this table we are going to do a total of 3 pours, meaning that when we're going to pour the first layer of 20 millimeters thick, we will do that in 2 sections. So we will pour 10 mil at a time. We will come with our gas torch, we will torch all the bubbles, and then we will come with our next 10 millimeters of epoxy pouring. This is going to help you to reduce bubbles as much as possible. And the next tip I want to share with you is when you're going to pour your second layer, we normally come back 24 hours later, and we make sure that our second layer is basically tacky. It's not fully set and hard, it's tacky, to make sure that your second layer is going to bond better to your first layer. And then this step we will obviously repeat to the third layer of our epoxy casting. So after I poured my 3 layers epoxy, I waited a total of 7 to 8 days to make sure the epoxy is set fully. And now I'm just removing my table from my mold and just using a normal hammer to remove the table from my mold. And as you can see, this is the reason we like using nails when we build our mold, is the mold removes quickly when you're going to remove your slab from your white melamine mold. So there's obviously a few steps that we missed here, otherwise our video is going to be more than an hour long. And we basically took the table to one of our local suppliers, we put it on a CNC machine to make sure we flatten our table on top and at the bottom. And I do have to say, this is the first time after we CNC'd our table, we put our table through a drum sander. And I obviously, honestly, will never do this again, because the drum sander makes extremely deep grooves into our table. It took us a really long time to remove the marks the drum sander made. And we're going to start off by sanding our table with our Rotex sanding machine with a 80 grits sandpaper on the Rotex setting. Now the Rotex setting I absolutely love. It's a more aggressive setting of sanding, and it's not like your normal orbital sander, it's much more aggressive. And as you can see here, using the Rotex makes the job very easy, removing all the marks the drum sander made. So this specific client we are building this table for requested that they want a glass top on top of the epoxy table. And this is where I mentioned before, we obviously built our table slightly bigger lengthwise and widthwise. Now just placing the glass top on top of our table and marking with our pencil on the sides where we need to cut with our Festool track saw. And you will see in the steps to follow, this was a super satisfying part of the project to see that the glass is sitting perfectly in place on top of the table. Just putting our track in place to make sure we cut exactly on the line. And another thing I want to show you quickly is how quick it is to change the blades on your Festool track. So as you can see, we're basically using a new blade on each table we build for our clients. That's to make sure we have a clean cut every single time. And just want to show you guys quickly how fast it is. And something I love about the Festool system is they make it super convenient for each user that's using the machine. And as you just flip that green switch on top, locks the blade in place. You remove the blade in a question of a few seconds. You install the new blade and you just fasten your bolt. And that took us a total of not even 1 minute changing a new blade. And the Allen key we use sits on the machine. It's super convenient and super user friendly. Now just making sure the glass is sitting in place, and I do have to apologize. This was the part the camera died, but I can promise you the glass did sit perfectly on top of our table. Now I do want to apologize also in advance that the following video footage has been shot in our new shop, and I'm not sure what happened, but the flickering of the lights is most probably my camera, or it's the lights that's installed. But sorry for that if this part of the video is going to give you a headache. There's absolutely nothing I can do about that. Anyway, moving to the next part is continue sanding the top side of our table with an 80 grit and 120 grit with our Rotex. And then we're going to move to our Festool ETS5 finishing sander. This is super critical if you want a smooth, perfect finish on your tables. The finishing sander is designed for finishing. Now we're going to sand our table down all the way to 400 grit sandpaper, because the oil we're going to use is called Odis oil, and Odis oil allow you to sand to higher grits, which I absolutely love. This is a new product that's called Crystal UV. It's from South Africa. I'm not sure if you get it in your country, but anyway, it needs sunlight or UV light to dry. And just to give you a good idea, once we add this epoxy inside all our small little cracks and holes, we apply our UV light, and it takes the epoxy about 30 seconds to set, which I absolutely love. This saves us almost like 2 or 3 days on each project. Now moving to our newest tool in our shop, it's the Festool Palm Router. We previously used the Festool OF 1400 router, which was a little bit heavy for doing the edging on our tables. And I honestly do have to say, this has become one of my favorite tools in my shop. This is so light, and it's so easy to route to the corners on our table. It's an absolute blast working with this machine. I absolutely love the Palm Router from Festool. So once we got to 180 grit, we routed our table and then we continued sanding to make sure that we remove all the marks the palm router made. And moving to the last step in our project, and we're going to use Odis oil, dark oil, and that's just to give it a slight dark sheen on our table, which I absolutely love, and the project came out beautifully. Just using a very old orbital sander on the lowest setting possible. And what I love about this step is the vibration of the machine basically massages the oil into the wood, and this is a absolute must if you're going to apply any oil to your table. And before I'm going to show you the final product, I do want to share with you, at the end of this video is a very important announcement we want to share with you. We've got an online epoxy masterclass, which you're obviously going to see at the end of this video, where we're going into detail and show you all our methods and techniques if you want to start to learn how to build epoxy tables. You do want to go and check that out. And while you are here, if it's your first time or if you watch our videos for a while now, if you want to support the channel and if you want to support me, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and I will see you next week with another super cool video. Before you go, let me know, what do you guys think of this first person videos? Do you want to see more of this, or is it crap? Thank you guys. See you next week. Love you. Cheers. Welcome to this online epoxy masterclass. Moisture content. You hit right into the core wood species to remove the bark with an aggressive steel wire brush. Table design, slab preparation, building process, epoxy mold. Release agent wax, calculate epoxy. 7, 8, so we got 16 points. Mixing epoxy, color consistency, whether to seal your live edges or not. Pouring epoxy, sanding between layers, sanding grooves inside your epoxy, dealing with bubbles, maximum depth, curing time, removing the table from your mold, a local CNC supplier. Start sanding, cutting your table to size and edges, filling the cracks and holes, smoky finish, high gloss see-through finish, wood surface finishing, tabletop supports. To drill into our wooden section, our online epoxy masterclass is finally here. It's 4 hours of masterclass where I'm going into detail on how we build all our epoxy tables, where I'm going to teach you from start to finish how to build a epoxy table successfully. I'm going to show you all our methods and techniques we take in our everyday business building epoxy tables successfully. Down in the description of this video, you're going to find the details on how to purchase this masterclass. You don't want to miss this one.